Last year, the world came together in Paris to reach an agreement to address the climate crisis. It was a historic moment, and it was just the beginning. Join us on our journey around the globe as we learn what it will take to build a healthy, clean energy future, and what more we all can do. We'll hear from the leaders, musicians, experts, and everyday people leading the fight to make climate action a reality. This is 24 hours of reality. We're on the road forward.
And hi, welcome. I'm Sam Champion. We're glad you're with us. Thank you for joining us for 24 Hours of Reality, The Road Forward. So last year, some very big news. You'll remember this. The world came together in Paris for COP21, where about 195 nations adopted an agreement that said, yes, they will reduce greenhouse gases, and yes, they will limit global temperatures. Now, that was history, but it was just the beginning. Now comes the very hard work of meeting those commitments. So travel with us from our home base here at Liberty State Park in New Jersey. And wait a minute, can I just show you this? Take a look at that gorgeous sunlight coming over the city of New York. It's beautiful this morning. Now, from right here, founder and chairman of Climate Reality Project and former Vice President Al Gore will lead the way around our globe to visit the top 24 greenhouse gas emitting countries. We will explore solutions in each nation, challenges they face as well, and how they could succeed in ensuring a sustainable future. We continue our look at the road forward with our 15th, believe it or not, of 24 countries, Russia. So here's Russia. It's the fourth highest greenhouse gas emitter, a country that has set a target of 25 to 30% greenhouse gas emission reduction below 1990 levels by 2030. So if certain forest conditions exist and the nation has vast potential for renewable energy sources, that if it could utilize, could provide almost 1/3 of its total primary energy supply. 1/3. So join me now in welcoming a man who has led the charge in educating and inspiring action on the climate crisis, the founder and chairman of the Climate Reality Project, Vice President Al Gore.
Good morning.
How are you,
Sam?
sir? Nice to see you.
Nice to see you. Every hour.
Every hour, and we're getting a little more daylight?
It's a beautiful sight across the river at Manhattan, and thank you, Sam. You're terrific.
Pleasure to be here.
Looking forward to exploring briefly in this slideshow Russia's contribution to the climate crisis and Russia's contribution to solving the climate crisis. The 24 largest emitters, we've been through the list. It's interesting that Russia is number 4 on the list. Of course, the vast land area of Russia has a lot to do with that, and a sizable population as well. For our Russian audience, I want to start with the iconic pictures of the Earth that I almost always start with, because they kind of set the stage and focus on what is most important here. We're talking about our shared home. This is the Earthrise picture from 1968 and the iconic blue marble photo from 1972 that really kicked off the modern environmental movement. So this image is from the space shuttle, and it shows the true nature of the Earth's atmosphere. The sky is not a limitless expanse. It's a very thin shell of atmosphere around the planet. The truth is we're using that as an open sewer now, with the emission of 110 million tons of man-made global warming pollution every single day, and the cumulative amount is now trapping as much heat energy every day in the Earth system as would be released by 400,000 Hiroshima-class atomic bombs exploding every 24 hours. That's a vast amount of energy. And it is really causing major problems, of course. And the principal source is CO2 emissions from the burning of fossil fuels. There are other sources, but this is the heart of it. And especially since the end of World War II, these CO2 emissions from fossil fuels have been skyrocketing, and there's some evidence that they may be starting to level off. We've gone 3 years now with no increase, but we're still having these annual additions of an enormous amount. Russia's greenhouse gas emissions reflects reflect the tremendous economic changes that accompanied the breakup of the former Soviet Union and the bumpy recovery since then. But one thing that jumps out at you when you look at Russia's energy situation is the fossil fuel subsidies, almost $40 billion per year, 2% of GDP. It's politically difficult to get rid of those subsidies, but countries around the world are waking up to the fact that that's one policy change that makes all the sense in the world. We don't want to subsidize the climate crisis, and we don't want to see these countries lose revenue that could be put to much more productive use for the best interests of their people. So let's look at where the emissions are coming from in Russia. Almost 90% from the energy sector, excuse me. And if you break that down, you'll see heat and electricity, as you would expect. And Russia is the largest source. Manufacturing, transport, construction, and so-called fugitive emissions, a particularly large part of Russia's emissions. So 14 of the 15 hottest years ever measured with instruments have been since 2001, and the hottest of all this year. Even though it's not over yet, it's already certain statistically to be the hottest ever measured in history. So if you look at the temperature trend in Russia, you see that the same thing that's happening globally is happening in Russia. In fact, the temperature increases in Russia partly because of its high latitude and the magnification of ice melting, which leads to more heat absorption on the surface that's no longer reflecting that incoming solar energy. The heat increases in Russia are actually twice as fast as the global average. And you might think, okay, it's a country with a lot of cold, so maybe it's good. Not really, because the soils are not suitable for agriculture in the far north. You get the melting of the permafrost. They have a huge soil erosion problem on the Arctic shores, and you have the bubbling up of methane, particularly in Siberia, and a lot of other problems. And with the warming, you also have this incredible problem of fires, which I will talk about in a moment. But the number of heat waves in western Russia is due to quadruple over the next quarter century. And there are new threats, according to the head of emergency situations, as they call it in Russia, new threats to infrastructure. A lot of infrastructure is built on frozen permafrost. There are other special situations that really create great challenges for Russian infrastructure. They have the same problem with these record downpours that most countries in the world are getting, with the extra heat in the oceans causing more water vapor to evaporate. When it comes over the land, you get these massive downpours. This one was in Kursk a few years ago. This was last year in a part of Russia. And in Rostov-on-Don at the end of June this year, they've had their share of these rain bombs, as many people are calling them. But one of the biggest problems related to the climate crisis in Russia is the vast increase in the number of fires. This is a satellite picture in the middle of July this year of a vast area covered with fire, and it actually recalls the historic fires that broke out some years ago in 2010 when 55,000 people died in those historic fires, mostly from smoke inhalation and other health-related problems connected to the fires. This actually also led them to cancel all their grain exports. That led to the second all-time high food price spike worldwide, and actually food riots in 60 countries, including in Tunisia, where the Arab Spring was kicked off by a food vendor at the peak of food prices. So the connection between the climate crisis effects and political instability is really quite significant. We're seeing air pollution, much of it due to fires in Russia. They're actually the second, well, let me pause before. Yeah, they're the second worst country in the world when it comes to mortality from outdoor air pollution, and the incidence of fires predicted in the years ahead is going way up. This is a graph showing the areas where you're going to get 40%, 60% more fires in the decades ahead, according to the scientists. This extra heat also is hurting crop yields in Russia. Up to a 30% decline in crop yields in some regions of Russia predicted as a result of the increasing temperatures. And of course, President Vladimir Putin, in his speech at the Paris conference, said that climate change has become one of the gravest challenges that humanity is facing. So the good news is that Russia joined with practically every country in the world in Paris to reach the agreement that commits the entire world to go down to net zero greenhouse gas emissions as early in the second half of this century as possible. And Russia's specific commitment in Paris is not as solid as some countries, but I think it's going to get there. Potential reductions of 25 to 30% below 1990 levels. Now that was a high level because it was, at the time of the breakup, just before the breakup of the former Soviet Union. Nevertheless, they've agreed to be a part of the world's effort. They did not block. They agreed to join. They are making efforts, and that's very good news. We are now seeing the solutions available there and the pending vast expansion of renewable sources of energy, including principally wind and solar. Solar costs are coming down quite dramatically, of course. This is a central fact of the sustainability revolution worldwide. And we've already seen the beginnings of the expansion of solar power in Russia. You're going to see a lot more of that, large utility scale installations and rooftop solar, manufacturing jobs as part of the solar revolution, a commitment to electric trains. They've long since had a commitment to electrification of mass transit. Half of Russia's railways are already electric. So how could Russia strengthen its commitment? By actually enhancing its commitment to get to peak emissions and make deep reductions, to diversify its economy and move beyond oil and gas, and incentivize to a much greater degree solar and wind to reduce methane emissions and capture that as a new source of revenue, improve energy efficiency, and hopefully ratify the Paris Climate Agreement. In any case, the world is grateful that Russia has joined the Paris Agreement, and in that way is helping to make certain that the sustainable future of the world will become a reality.